Critics are not only questioning the intent of the Disinformation Board, but also how the administration has tried and failed repeatedly to explain what it would actually do and how it would do it. Let's bring in Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He's on the Armed Services, Judiciary, and Joint Economic Committees, as well as the Select Committee on Intelligence, and he's still looking for more work. Senator, good to be with you today. First of all, your thoughts on what now looks like a defunct Disinformation Governance Board.
Well, John, I'm glad to know that this Orwellian Ministry of Truth is at least paused for the moment, but I think it's important to realize that it's only paused because the American people found out about it. The government has no business refereeing disputes engaged in political campaigns or public debates. If you don't like someone else's speech, the solution is more speech. It's not to use the Department of Homeland Security, for goodness sakes, to try to censor or label someone's arguments in the public sphere. You know, I think that Democrats often believe that disinformation and misinformation are simply facts that reflect poorly on Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. So again, it's good that they finally came to their senses and paused this board, but Congress needs to act in the weeks ahead to ensure that it and nothing like it can ever be created again in the future.
So, Senator, you say that the reason that it's gone the way of the Dodo is because that the American people found out about it. But Taylor Lawrence of the Washington Post, who wrote the article breaking the news, suggests it was because DHS, the Biden administration, and Nina Jankowicz were getting beaten up on by people from the right. She wrote, quote, "Jankowicz's experience is a prime example of how the right-wing internet apparatus operates, where far-right influencers attempt to identify a target, present a narrative, and then repeat mischaracterizations across social media and websites with the aim of discrediting and attacking anyone who seeks to challenge them." I mean, she put a lot of stuff out there that wasn't true.
Yeah, John, I don't know who that reporter is, but she seems as excitable and unhinged as Nina Jankowicz did. Not only should we never have a Ministry of Truth like this board, but we shouldn't have a woman like that purporting to referee debates among the American people. There was no coordinated right-wing internet campaign or anything else. What you had were millions of Americans who saw the same set of ominous facts, and their elected representatives here in Washington and around the country recoiling from the idea that the federal government, the Department of Homeland Security, with all of its law enforcement and national security powers, might be refereeing political debates in the public sphere. That's not coordination, that's not a campaign, that's the citizens of a free country jealously guarding their freedoms.
Senator, let me jump to another topic because we are in the minutes ahead expecting Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, to come out and give us a preview of the president's trip to Seoul and Tokyo. The president is going to South Korea and Japan to reinforce U.S. ties with allies in the face of China's rising regional dominance. If you were president of the United States, what would you tell our allies in Korea and Japan?
Well, the first thing, John, is I would have gone a lot earlier than 16 months into Joe Biden's tenure. China is our #1 threat in the world. Asia is the most important theater in the world. Unfortunately, Joe Biden's failures in places like Afghanistan and Ukraine have taken a lot of attention off of counteracting the China threat. In Japan, importantly, he's going to be meeting with members of the so-called Quad, our partners in East Asia and the Indo-Pacific region, to try to counteract China. And I would make every effort to ensure that they understand that we recognize China as a threat, not only to us, but to them, and we will take every measure necessary to defend our safety, our freedom, our prosperity.
You know, the United States has got a tremendous amount of economic clout over China because modern China was built off of the pocketbooks of American consumers as well as their burgeoning military. How should President Biden use that leverage against China to stop it from its goals? And it's right there in the Belt and Road policy of not just regional domination, but global domination ultimately.
Yeah, John, our policy should be one of strategic decoupling, if you will, from China. We cannot be dependent on China for critical goods that are necessary to our safety, to our health, to our prosperity. Sometimes those are high-tech goods or the components of high-tech goods like rare earth minerals that are so important in computers and smartphones and everything else. Sometimes they're very low-tech goods, as we learned in the pandemic. Things like ibuprofen and acetaminophen and latex gloves and surgical gowns. We cannot be dependent on China for any good that is essential to American safety and health and prosperity. You've got countries like Japan and Australia who are in the same position, and they would look to us for leadership to help strengthen the resiliency of their own economies as well. Much better to be trading with our partners and friends rather than trading with the Chinese communists.
Does the United States need to do more to develop the manufacturing capacity of regional countries outside of China, like Taiwan, not Taiwan particularly, because their manufacturing is pretty good. Thailand is what I meant to say. Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, in order to supplant our reliance on China for our manufactured goods?
John, the first thing we need to do is rebuild our manufacturing here at home and bring as much of that production back home as we can. Again, especially in those critical industries that Americans depend on for our safety and our health and our prosperity. But second, it was a terrible mistake ever to outsource so many of our jobs and industries to China, of all places, a country that is 4 times our size, a country that views itself as the middle kingdom, sitting at the middle of the earth with all other states on earth as a vassal state to China. We have other countries, many of which you mentioned, like the Philippines or like Taiwan or like Thailand, that are friends. Some of them are treaty partners in security matters that would be happy to trade more with us, and that also look to us for leadership against the Chinese communists.
So one more on this topic, and that is that North Korea seems to be misbehaving again, and U.S. intelligence believes that before the president, or maybe even while he's there in Asia, they are going to have either an ICBM test or maybe even another nuclear test. You know, I remember for a time during the last administration, North Korea, said a lot of things. They didn't get very far in terms of denuclearization, but they weren't firing off ICBMs and they weren't blowing off nukes.
Yeah, that's true, John. Unfortunately, those engagements did not lead them to denuclearize. I think at this point we have to recognize that the best policy we have against North Korea is missile defense. North Korea is not China. They're not Russia. They don't have the number of missiles that can totally overwhelm a well-funded, scientifically sound missile defense system. We should be devoting more of our defense dollars towards a regional missile defense system that can be stationed in the Western Pacific, as well as in Alaska and Hawaii and our West Coast, that will neutralize the North Korean threat to the American people.
We expect Jake Sullivan momentarily, but we just got a little bit of news. I want to go back to where we started here, because apparently Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, after getting rid of this Disinformation Governance Board, is now asking former DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff and former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Jamie Gorelick to lead a thorough review and assessment conducted through the Bipartisan Homeland Security Advisory Council to focus on answering 2 pivotal questions. How can the department most effectively and appropriately address disinformation threats that pose our country while protecting free speech, civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy? Second, how can DHS achieve greater transparency in all of this as well? So Mayorkas is like, about face, let's go back the other way. I mean, Chertoff and Gorelick, they're credible people.
Well, it sounds like he's running like a scalded dog from this issue and trying to throw it to a commission. But I would say the simplest way he can answer those questions is just keep his nose out of political debates. The American people can debate in the public sphere questions of great importance, whether it's about questions in Washington or in their local communities at school boards, between themselves. We don't need the federal government, and certainly not the Department of Homeland Security, trying to butt in and label and censor the speech of the American people.
All right, Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas, always good to catch up with you. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thank you, John.
Jillian?